Do you know, Commissioner, on what date that exchange was finalized between, if you can't comment on the nature of the advice provided, do you know on that it occurred?
You're trying to put me in a very complicated position. I'm not supposed to. The advice is confidential, and there's a flight took place, and I can only assume. Actually, let's not be pussyfoot around here. Yes, I can tell. Advice was sought before he went on his trip, and advice was given.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, and Ms. Robinson-Delpay for joining us again. Appreciate the opportunity to ask questions and get more information on behalf of Canadians. Commissioner, perhaps in your reading of the news over the last year prior to your accepting this appointment, or since your having assumed the office, you're familiar with the Prime Minister having spent the new year at the Prospect Estate in Jamaica. This is owned by Peter Green's family. Now, Mr. Green is the godson to the late Pierre Trudeau, father of the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Now, Mr. Green's son, Alexander, in turn, recently made a large donation to the Family Foundation that, of course, shares the Prime Minister's name, of which he is involved. And the cost to Canadians was $160,000. They don't know if they paid for the $9,000 per night fee that the Prime Minister would have incurred if he were not there at the invitation of the donor to the Trudeau Foundation. So in relation to this trip, what we're looking to find out is who approved the trip from the Ethics Commissioner's office and on what date that approval was given to the Prime Minister or to his office.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for sending me in advance a letter of your concerns. Let's start from the beginning. We don't approve travel. There's no provision in the Act that we don't do that. What we do is we approve of, if somebody receives a gratuity or a gift, he or she can come to us and ask, is this okay, or do I have a problem, a conflict of interest? And we give him an answer. We do that on a confidential basis. It's up to the requester to decide whether he wants to make it public or not, etc. We do not comment on any of this. In this case, all I can assure you that I assume I wasn't here. It's the most profound that it's often in issues of this nature, a request would have been made and an answer would have been given.
Do you know, Commissioner, on what date that exchange was finalized between, if you can't comment on the nature of the advice provided, do you know on that it occurred?
You're trying to put me in a very complicated position. I'm not supposed to. The advice is confidential, and there's a flight took place, and I can only assume. Actually, let's not be pussyfoot around here. Yes, I can tell. Advice was sought before he went on his trip, and advice was given. If you want to know the nature of the advice, you have to ask him, not me.
Well, we'd be pleased to put questions to the Prime Minister if he'd come to committee, but we can't get any of his caucus even to be here. How do you think that in relation to this type of trip, where we have $160,000 that taxpayers are on the hook for, and you have this relationship with the Prime Minister's Foundation, a donor giving a trip to the Prime Minister, it has shades of the Trudeau Report 1 that your predecessor ruled on with respect to the Prime Minister's illegal vacation to Bell's Cay. He was in violation of the Act. How can the Act and the Code be strengthened to prevent this type of ambiguity and these contraventions of the law that we've seen, as detailed in the Trudeau Report 1?
First of all, you're making a certain stipulation here. You say 160,000. I don't know where that figure comes from, what it's based on, in anything. But be more to the point, I don't have opinions. I deal with requests. I deal with requests of judgment where people come to and tell them whether they comply with the existing law or not. That's my function. My function is not to give opinions or talk about how things look, but whether people have complied with the rules or not.
Is there a backlog of investigations in your office?
At present, we have six. We have eight open cases in which involved 11 people.
8 open cases which involve 11.
When I be careful when I say cases, it means if something has been referred to and we look at it, doesn't necessarily mean it will result in an investigation or something like that. There's 8 cases where people have brought things to our attention which we're looking at.
And with a 6-month appointment, how do you plan to address that backlog while also addressing any new matters that are referred to or discovered by your office in order to maintain public's confidence that the Act and the Code are being complied with?
Look, yes, just because there was no commissioner doesn't mean the work didn't go on. And if something is referred to us, obviously we look at it, we do preliminary, we make it, and then the decision is made whether there should be an investigation or not. And once there is an investigation, obviously it becomes one. The preliminary work has been done on these 8 cases, and soon I will get a report from my people of what they recommend, and we'll decide whether to proceed, whether to dismiss them, etc. It's not a big backlog. It's perfectly handleable, and we will deal with it. The problem really arises with that this Act, in comparison to other acts, does not provide that in the absence of the commissioner, the deputy commissioner, or he may assign the proposal to something. There is nothing.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And that's really the problem.
Okay.
Commissioner, one of the things that I hear often from constituents is a general erosion of trust in institutions. And being a part of the Ethics Committee and having dealt with a whole host of questions around the conduct of public office holders and some of the perceived challenges that exist that have led to that erosion of trust, and with the situation where the former interim commissioner was announced, and it was quickly revealed of a close connection with a senior Liberal cabinet minister, and that she did the right thing and stepped down, which was important to not eroding that trust further. But the fact that happened, and what was certainly seen by many, and I heard a lot about it from constituents, a poor judgment on the part of the Prime Minister. And the Act clearly articulates that there has to be consultation for the appointment of a commissioner, but not an interim. And that's certainly something that needs to be addressed. But as I was preparing for this meeting, and I as well looked at your CV, and you have an exemplary record of public service. But just because this is a question that I'm asked often by constituents, and it's about some of those conflicts of interest that are perceived to exist. So I almost hate to have to ask you this, but to just make sure that it's on the record about if you have a connection to the Trudeau Foundation, a relative of a cabinet minister, an in-law of a cabinet minister, or some of those other very, very high-profile connections that have cast doubt on some of the other situations that have contributed to this erosion of trust. So, Commissioner, I'm hoping you can comment and just put on the record exactly and to clear up if you have any of those connections that have led to, in part, some of that erosion of trust that's taken place.
To my knowledge, I have none. I have been retired for 10 years. Obviously, I have, prior to retirement, been involved with a lot of people in government, in both parties, etc. If for some, and some of them were Most of them are business relationships, a few were also personal. Should one of those come up in any of the case, I will have no hesitation whatsoever to immediately recuse myself and designate somebody else to deal with it. And it would be another one of the commissioners. Let's say I would ask the commissioner of lobbyist registration or somebody like that, some another servant of parliament like me, to basically deal with this, because I would doubt there was something will arrive, but who knows? You know, I certainly am prepared to do that.
You've been busy over the course of the last several weeks. One of the things that consistently comes up is the Conflict of Interest Act itself. As you know, it came into effect in 2007. There was the statutory review in 2013. Then my understanding is there was prorogation. The act was then introduced again, it was tabled in the House in 2014. It's been 9 years since the act has been reviewed. Have you come to any conclusion or thought about whether the Conflict of Interest Act itself needs to be reviewed?
You have to ask me that. I can only answer generally. I think any legislation after that long period of time, as you mentioned, deserves to be reviewed, you know, because things do change, and especially in this age of social media, etc., we have to see whether some of the procedures or some of the way we looked at it, which were based on a paper world, really still make sense or can be improved in this day and age.